The screech of tearing metal at 3 a.m. wasn't something you expect in the pastel perfection of Harmony Grove Estates. It ripped through the silent suburban night like a betrayal. I was out of bed before my brain even caught up, bare feet slapping cold hardwood as I sprinted outside. The scene that greeted me under the motion light made my stomach turn. My heavy wrought iron gate, the one Emily and I hung with our own hands the summer after we moved in, lay mangled 20 yards down the driveway like it had been hit by a truck. And on the beautiful river stone wall my father-in-law built, dripping red spray paint screamed 3 words: conform or leave. The paint was fresh, running down the stones in grotesque rivulets. It looked like the wall itself was bleeding. My blood ran cold, but not with fear. With something colder. Something that felt a lot like the beginning of the end for someone. I knew exactly who had fired this first shot. Deborah Langford. The president of our Homeowners Association. The woman who smiled at block parties while quietly ruling her beige kingdom with an iron fist wrapped in passive-aggressive emails. To understand how we got to bleeding walls and twisted metal, you have to understand what my little corner of suburbia meant. And you have to understand the woman who wanted to erase it. Harmony Grove Estates was supposed to be the American dream. Cookie-cutter houses in tasteful shades of beige and gray, perfect lawns mowed to HOA-approved heights exactly 2.5 inches, and residents who waved with the exact right amount of enthusiasm. My house sat on the corner lot with the biggest backyard, the one with the wildflower and rose garden that actually meant something instead of just looking pretty for resale photos. Emily had planted that garden the year our daughter was born. She called it our little rebellion against store-bought everything. Roses that smelled like heaven in June, wildflowers that drew butterflies instead of complaints, and a small vegetable patch that fed us fresh tomatoes all summer. The neighbors used to compliment it. Until Deborah decided it was a threat to property values and community standards. Think of the children, she'd say with that fake concerned smile, as if my zucchini might corrupt the youth. I remember the first time she came for me. It was 10 years ago. Right after Emily passed from that aggressive cancer no amount of prayer or money could stop. Deborah rolled up in her white Lexus, clipboard in hand, wearing that signature pastel pantsuit that screamed, "I'm not bossy, I'm the president." She wanted me to sell or at least sign the expanded HOA covenant so the new developer behind me could harmonize my view. Said my property was visually impacting the community aesthetic. "David," she cooed, voice dripping with fake sympathy, "everything has a price for harmony. We're prepared to make it worth your while if you just conform a little. Your garden is lovely, but it's not approved. Think of the resale value for everyone." I looked at her, then at Emily's roses swaying in the breeze. "Deborah, this isn't about harmony. This is about control." My answer is no. Final. Her smile didn't slip. But her eyes did. Just for a second. That flash of pure entitlement when a peasant refuses the queen. She left without another word. But I knew the war had started. For years she left me mostly alone. Until 6 months ago when the new developer bought the empty lots behind me and suddenly my non-compliant garden and the big American flag I fly on the pole Emily bought became a problem. The polite letters started. Then the fines. Then the real war. The first few attacks were almost comical in their pettiness. Glossy HOA brochures for approved landscapers, wedged under my windshield wiper. My mailbox knocked sideways 3 times. The third time it was stuffed with printouts of the community guidelines highlighted in yellow. All gardens must be decorative only. No edible plants that could attract pests or lower values. One flyer even suggested I replace my roses with tasteful mulch and annuals in HOA-approved colors only. I didn't react. I just watched. That's what they never understood about me. I don't yell. I don't post on the neighborhood Facebook group screaming about tyranny. I observe. And I remember. Then the drone started. A little black hornet buzzing just over my fence line for hours. Camera pointed straight at my garden and my back porch. Spooked my dog Max. It made my daughter uncomfortable when she visited from college. It was an invasion wrapped in community safety. I called the sheriff once, but they said as long as it stayed on their side of the property line it was legal. Of course it was. But the real gut punch came on a Tuesday morning. I went out to water Emily's garden and found the plants wilting overnight. The rose bushes, the ones she'd babed for years, were yellowing at the edges, leaves curled and brown. It wasn't drought. It wasn't season. I knelt down and saw the small, perfectly drilled holes near the roots. Someone had come in the night and poisoned my wife's memory with herbicide. Black humor hit me then. The woman who preached "think of the children" had just murdered flowers in the name of curb appeal. That was the moment the quiet rage turned into something sharper. Something with purpose. Deborah wasn't done though. Oh no. Her masterpiece arrived in an official envelope from the county code enforcement. An anonymous complaint about illegal agricultural runoff, contaminating the community retention pond. My organic garden suddenly labeled a biohazard. They hit me with a cease and desist order and the threat of $5,000 fines per day if I didn't rip everything out. I stood in my kitchen holding that letter surrounded by Emily's canning jars and felt the walls closing in. They were trying to bleed me dry with red tape. Force me to sell cheap so the developer could expand their perfect beige empire. Neighbors I'd waved to for years now crossed the street when they saw me, whispering about that guy who won't follow the rules. Deborah had turned the whole block against me with one smile and a few emails titled, "For the greater good of Harmony Grove." They thought I was just some grieving widower who would fold under pressure. They were wrong. The next morning I drove to the big box store and came back with enough security equipment to make the NSA proud. Motion-activated trail cameras. Solar floodlights powerful enough to turn night into day. Infrared sensors and directional microphones. I didn't hide what I was doing. I mounted the lights high on the garage and the shed while neighbors peeked through blinds. I walked my fence line in broad daylight, placing cameras in clever spots. One tucked inside a hollowed birdhouse overlooking the garden. Another hidden in the branches of the old maple. Redneck engineering meets suburban survival. Back inside, I linked everything to my laptop and phone. Any movement on my property after dark, and I'd know instantly. This wasn't paranoia. This was preparation. For 3 nights the only intruders were the 4-legged kind. Raccoons raiding the compost, my dog chasing shadows. I started to wonder if maybe they'd backed off after the poison. Then came night 4. It was 2:17 a.m. when the alert buzzed on my phone, jolting me awake from a light sleep. Heart steady, I grabbed the device and tapped into the live feed. There they were. 3 figures moving like ghosts along the back fence line, dressed in black hoodies pulled low. One carried a gallon bucket. Another had bolt cutters. The third, the one who moved with that unmistakable swagger, was Marcus Thorne, Deborah's vice president and lapdog real estate buddy. I zoomed in. The faint glow from my new floodlight caught the back of his hoodie. The embroidered Harmony Grove HOA logo, that stupid stylized oak leaf they used like it was royal crest. They were heading straight for my backyard workshop, the little shed where I kept every tool Emily and I had ever used together, the workbench where I built her memorial birdhouses, the place that still smelled like her lavender soap. I dialed Sheriff Ramirez's direct line while pulling on boots. Then I unlocked the gun safe and took out my old Remington, loaded with rock salt rounds. Not lethal, but they'd leave a memory and a story for the water cooler crowd at the HOA meeting. I slipped out the back door, keeping low behind the greenhouse. The moon was high, but I knew every shadow in my yard like I knew my own name. I could hear them whispering now, low chuckles cutting the night. Marcus muttered something about teaching the HOA holdout a lesson he won't forget. That's when I stepped out from behind the greenhouse and flicked the master switch on my phone. The entire backyard exploded in blinding white light. They froze like deer on the highway, hands flying up to shield their eyes. "Evening, boys," I said calmly, Remington resting easy in my hands. "Lost on your way to the next HOA-approved paint party?" Panic hit instantly. The one with the paint bucket turned to run. Bad move. I raised the shotgun and fired one salt round into the dirt 2 feet behind him. The boom cracked across the subdivision like thunder. He screamed, dropped the bucket, and face-planted into my zucchini patch. The other 2 scrambled back over the fence like frightened rabbits, leaving Marcus standing there with his bolt cutter still in hand. I didn't chase. I didn't have to. The cameras had caught everything in crystal clear 4K, including the HOA logo on their sweatshirts. Sheriff Ramirez and his deputy rolled up 18 minutes later. They found me standing over Marcus, who was sitting on a hay bale shaking, nursing a leg full of stinging welts. He was no older than 25, some college kid Deborah had hired for compliance enforcement. Under the lights he cracked like cheap drywall, spilled everything. Deborah Langford and Marcus had paid him cash to soften up the non-compliant homeowner. It was supposed to be scare tactics only, he swore. Get the widower to sell cheap. They had names. They had confessions. And when Ramirez reviewed my footage on the spot, he had positive ID on Marcus and clear shots of the bolt cutters and paint. I had one. Or so I thought. 3 days later my neighbor Linda, the one who used to bring me casseroles, knocked on my door looking pale. David, turn on Channel 6. There she was on the evening news, Deborah Langford at a podium in full pearl-clutching mode, face arranged in solemn sincerity. An internal investigation has revealed unacceptable rogue actions by our former Vice President Marcus Thorne, she announced, voice trembling with fake concern. He has been immediately terminated. We at Harmony Grove HOA apologize for any distress caused and are cooperating fully with authorities. She played the responsible leader perfectly, horrified by the subordinate she couldn't control. In one slick move she sacrificed her night, admitted just enough fault to look reasonable, and painted herself as the cleanup crew. The district attorney would now have a hard time going after the HOA itself. My clear-cut victory had turned to smoke. Watching Deborah lie so smoothly to the cameras, her mask of corporate compassion never cracking, changed something in me. The hot rage cooled into something harder, sharper. I was done reacting. Done defending. I was going hunting. My new objective was simple. Get her. Not her hired kids. Her. I needed her voice, her face, her direct orders caught on tape. Undeniable and unforgivable. A few days later the first piece of the puzzle arrived in my inbox. An encrypted email from an anonymous account. 5 words only. She's not done. The workshop. No signature, but I knew. A few weeks earlier I'd installed a brand new high-end irrigation pump and backup generator in the workshop to keep Emily's garden alive through droughts. Destroying it would be crippling, far worse than graffiti. This was escalation. I thought back to the faces on the HOA board I'd seen in the newsletter. One had always stood out. Ellen Langford, Deborah's sister-in-law, same sharp cheekbones but softer, worried eyes. My gut said I'd just found a reluctant ally inside the enemy camp. The workshop would be the bait. My plan formed cold and clear. For this to work I had to look weak, distracted, and gone. I spent the next morning making a show of packing my truck with camping gear. I stopped by Linda's on the way out. Heading upstate to see my daughter for a few days, I told her loud enough for the whole cul-de-sac to hear. Place is all yours. Water the plants if you want. I didn't go upstate. I drove 10 miles down the road, parked behind an old strip mall, and hiked back through the woods with a backpack full of upgraded gear. This time I installed a high-fidelity directional microphone hidden in the eaves of the shed, aimed straight at the path to the workshop. I placed a new pinhole camera inside the workshop itself, looking out through a knot hole. I was no longer monitoring borders. I was setting a stage. For 2 days nothing, just wind and silence. I sat in my darkened living room, laptop glow casting long shadows, old Remington against the chair, senses razor sharp. I was a hunter in my own home, waiting for the predator to walk into my sights. On the third night, just after 1 a.m., the motion sensor pinged. My heart settled into a low, steady thud. This was it. I watched the screen as a dark van, lights off, rolled to a quiet stop at the edge of my property. 4 figures emerged. I recognized Marcus Thorne's swagger immediately. Back for another payday or revenge. Another man carried a crowbar. A third hauled a 5-gallon gas can. And then the fourth stepped out from the passenger side. She wasn't dressed for a raid. She wore a dark designer coat, standing back, posture radiating pure authority. Deborah Langford herself. My fingers trembled slightly as I hit record on the microphone feed. Her voice came through crisp and clear in the dead night. No mistakes this time, Marcus. The workshop, the pump, the generator, all of it. Burn it. Make sure there's nothing left but ashes. We can't let that eyesore garden survive another season. A slow smile spread across my face in the darkness. Got you. I let them get closer. Watched them pry open the workshop door. Watched them start sloshing gasoline around, fumes practically radiating from the screen. I needed the act undeniable, attempted arson, conspiracy, the works. Marcus pulled a lighter. The flint will scraped loud in the mic. Now. I hit the master switch. Every floodlight on the property flashed on at once, bathing the scene in brutal artificial daylight. At the same moment the pre-recorded siren I'd rigged blasted through the speakers, a deafening shriek that tore the night apart. They froze in the glare, pure tableau of criminal stupidity. Marcus dropped the lighter. Deborah's head snapped toward me as I stepped out of the shadows of the garage, Remington ready. That's far enough, Deborah, I called, voice calm. The siren cut off on its timer. Her mask of composure finally shattered. Shock curdled into pure hatred under the lights. Marcus made a move to run. I fired one salt round into the workshop wall a foot from his head. Boom. Wood splintered. He screamed and hit the dirt. In the distance a real siren began to wail. My system had auto-alerted Sheriff Ramirez the second the workshop sensor tripped. Red and blue lights bounced up the driveway, illuminating the terrified faces. Deborah stood motionless, trapped between my floodlights and the approaching cruisers. She looked at me, eyes promising hell. But it was empty now. Her power had evaporated under a dozen cameras and her own recorded voice. Her game of suburban thrones was over. The truth, it turns out, is a heavy weapon. It took months to carry it from my backyard to the steps of Langston County Courthouse. The town buzzed. The story of the quiet widower versus the HOA queen had become local legend. When I walked in wearing my Sunday best, I could feel the eyes. I wasn't just David Harlan anymore. I was the guy who said no. Across the courtroom sat Deborah Langford in a sharp gray suit, hair perfect, high-priced Austin lawyer looking smug beside her. Marcus sat a few feet away, pale and deflated. My attorney Ava laid it out simple. This isn't about garden rules. This is about a systematic campaign of intimidation, coercion, and criminal conspiracy by one woman who refuses to hear the word no. The centerpiece was the final night video. When Ava played it, the courtroom went dead silent. The jury saw the figures creeping, the gasoline sloshing, the cold, clear image of Deborah Langford overseeing it all. Then her voice filled the room. Burn it. Make sure there's nothing left but ashes. One juror put a hand to her mouth. The defense tried everything: entrapment, doctored audio, painting me as a paranoid recluse. But then Ava called her final witness. The prosecution calls Ellen Langford to the stand. A wave of murmurs swept the room. Deborah's mask cracked with pure panic. Ellen, looking terrified but resolute, walked up and told everything. Deborah's decade-long obsession with my property, internal HOA emails outlining the pressure campaign, how she'd boasted about driving Marcus to commit the vandalism. It was the final nail. The jury was out less than 2 hours. On the charge of conspiracy to commit arson, the foreman said, looking straight at me, we find the defendant Deborah Langford guilty on all counts. The judge delivered the sentence with open contempt: 2 years probation, $250,000 fine. Court ordered dissolution of the entire Harmony Grove HOA board within 30 days, and a psychiatric evaluation for authoritarian behavioral tendencies. As deputies led her out, Deborah's composure was gone. Her eyes met mine one last time. I didn't smile. I just gave a slow, deliberate nod. My victory didn't need noise. The media circus eventually left. The dissolved HOA left residents holding meetings that were actually about knowing each other instead of finding each other. Some even asked me for advice on starting a simple co-op. I wished them well but politely declined. I had all the community I needed. I spent the next month healing more than fences. I painted over the stone wall, erasing the scar. I hung a stronger gate. With a good arborist, Emily's roses recovered. Fighters, he said, just like everything else on this land. The rhythm returned. A month after the verdict, I threw the first annual Harlan Garden Freedom Day. I sent invitations to the whole block, even drove through the now liberated streets and left flyers in every mailbox. That Saturday my yard was full of pickup trucks and lawn chairs. Kids ran laughing through the wildflowers while a local band played. I'd hung a new hand-carved sign at the entrance. Harlan Garden, HOA free since always. As the sun dipped low, I stood on my porch with a glass of iced tea watching the scene. My daughter was home laughing with neighbors. Even Ellen Langford came, giving me a quiet, respectful nod before leaving. Fireflies blinked in the dusk, laughter mixed with music. Emily's roses stood behind me like silent guardians, leaves catching the last light. The war was over. My kingdom was at peace. And I finally understood. Freedom isn't a gift handed to you by rules or boards. It's a garden. You have to wake up every single day, get your hands dirty, and tend to it. You have to fight the weeds and the blight with everything you've got, because it's the only thing truly worth fighting for. So tell me, was David Harlan the neighborhood troublemaker for daring to keep a personal garden and an American flag in his own backyard? Or was Deborah Langford, and every HOA Karen like her, the real villain hiding behind community standards and a smile? You decide.